Hello. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I hope that everybody's having a great day. See if we get even more light in here. There we go. I hope everybody had a great weekend. We've got a great episode planned for us today. Let's make sure that we have... I hope everybody had a great weekend. We got good audio. I hope everybody had a great weekend. This is the Alpha Phase Podcast. We're going to wait just a few minutes for those who would like to join us online to be able to do so. We've been going live about 5 days a week for a little while, testing it out, seeing if it helps, if it's adding value. We're learning new skills and abilities. And just growing this season. It's been a very great growth season. And just really enjoying it. So we're going to wait just a second here, and we'll get started with the Alpha Phase Podcast. Let me get myself in position, and we'll go ahead and go. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. I am the Electrical Code Coach, and this is the Alpha Phase Podcast. And our goal is to be the #1 in adding value to you. We want to motivate, educate, and inspire. Let's get to it. Let's take a look today at today in history, or this month in history. Now, I'm reading off a very small prompt here, so I think that'll make it a little bit better. And let's go ahead and dive into this. In November 1777, German physicist Georg Christoph Lichtenberg first documented the branching patterns of electrical discharge on insulating surfaces, what later came to be known as the Lichtenberg figures. While experimenting with static electricity and high voltage discharges, he observed that when a spark passed through a material, it left behind a fractal-like, tree-like scorching or burn marks. These mesmerizing patterns revealed something deeper. Electricity doesn't always take a straight path, but seeks the path of least resistance and leaves a signature of its passage. The discovery bridged the gap between physics and visual art, and since then, Lichtenberg figures have enabled scientists to study discharge phenomena, dielectric breakdown, and even forensic patterns from lightning or electric arcs. For our modern readers, this reminds us that what looks like a simple spark damage actually reflects fundamental physics on how the charge moves through complex media. This November timing makes it a perfect on this month milestone in electrical history. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen this burning type art. It's very cool if you ever go to like a festival or something and they're selling it. It's actually pretty cool, but it's interesting you see it here also on the human body. We've always were taught that electricity takes the path of least resistance. And while the lion's share may go on the path of least resistance, this fundamentally proves here that it takes any and all paths. And it really does. It takes any and all paths back. But you'll see where the lion's share was along the path of least resistance. But it's very interesting and very cool to learn about. The next one for today in history I thought was fun. Let me put me over here out of the way. On November 6, 1928, inventor Colonial Jacob Schick was granted a key patent for the first widely commercialized electric razor. Schick still sells razors today. Although modest compared to power grids and transformation lines that we've been learning about, this event speaks of how electricity entered daily consumer life. It didn't take too long for us to start making consumer products. And in the same way that AI is innovating the world today, just like in 1880, they could have never imagined a toaster, let alone there being a factory and multiple factories dedicating to making this one item. There's going to be items invented the next 5 to 10 years that are going to create entire industries that we can't even imagine today. The electric razor turned electric engineering and motor design into something you held in your hand. It symbolized the shift from industrial and lighting uses of electricity to household and personal uses. For a November in electrical history format, it shows the diversification of electrical technology beyond big machines into the personal domain. For us, the readership, this is a strong everyday innovation piece. When you flip a switch to shave, we are part of a history that's over 90 years old. It underscores how electrical technology scaled into portable devices and how that is too now a part of the electrical overall history. Let's take a look at some of the photos here. So here is the original patent. One of my goals is to have a patent, not to worry about keeping the proprietariness of a product, but just because I want one. It's one of my bucket list items. And look at this here. I don't know if I would strap that to my face or not. It just looks like a vibrating. I'm not convinced this one on the right is the original. I think this one right here is the original, and it looks like a straight razor attached to a vibrating motor. This one over here looks like that maybe it came from the 30s or the 40s, maybe a little bit later, but still very cool technology. And what's amazing about electrical is there's always going to be a new and greater innovation and a new greater way to harness this technology. Now let's take a look at the code of the day, and this one might surprise you, it might anger you, or it just might get you excited on this Monday morning. Paraphrase code language here. We're in Article 250. There's so much richness and depth in Article 250 that it's just good for us to stay in here and continue to do it. Article 250.54, auxiliary grounding electrodes. You're allowed to connect one or more grounding electrodes to equipment grounding conductors listed in 250.118. So we're talking about the equipment grounding conductors in 250.118, all of the different types, the wire type, the pipe type, bus bar type, all these different types. These auxiliary electrodes don't need to be bonded. Or we're talking about connecting to the equipment grounding conductor, but we're actually talking about driving ground rods, and I'll flush this out more. These auxiliary electrodes don't need to meet the bonding rules in 250.50 or in 250.53C, and they're not required to meet the resistance specs of 250.53A2 exception, talking about the 25 ohms or less. However, the earth itself cannot serve as a reliable ground fault path as clearly stated in other parts of the code. So let me explain what's going on here. This is telling us that we are allowed to essentially drive a ground rod anywhere we want. You could drive a ground rod at your dishwasher. You could drive a ground rod at your HVAC machine if you wanted to. You could drive a ground rod anywhere you want. They're often used in the real world for like CNC machines to reduce with static electricity. They're often used at like TIG welders because of the very high frequencies. You can use it as a great ground reference, as a stabilization, potentially also releasing surges, helping dissipate surges. There's a lot of things that you could use it for, but essentially I could walk into my dishwasher in my kitchen, go outside, drive a ground rod, run me a wire inside, and connect it right to the equipment grounding conductors right there. So with that being said, should you do it? I'm not telling you to do it or not to do it. Should I do it on my dishwasher? Probably not. Do I also need to look at the manufacturer specifications? Yes, I do. And if they mandatory require one, or if they don't require one at all, or say that or prohibit it, better said. So just keep an eye on that. Would it make any sense to drive one on my dishwasher? No. Might it make sense to drive one on a piece of equipment that may be generating static or has more likelihood to create differences and potentials that can build up? It very well might do that. Now, this is not talking about generators that require a grounding electrode, not talking about anything like that. Some of those physically require it. But I'm talking about if I want to walk up to any piece of equipment in my home and drive a ground rod, I am allowed to drive an auxiliary electrode anywhere I want. You're not required to meet I need 2 ground rods. So you don't have to do 2 ground rods. You're also not required to connect it back to the grounding electrode system. It's not one of the available electrodes. Keep that in mind. So if I do drive one at my dishwasher, it's not now kicked in by 250.50 where you have to have all available electrodes connected together at a structure or building. So keep that in mind. I can drive it at my dishwasher if I wanted to, connect it to the equipment grounding conductors, don't have to have 2 of them, don't have to meet the 25 ohms or less, and I don't have to run back to the other grounding electrodes or count it as one of the available electrodes. Now, in certain situations, it can be a perfect fit. In most situations, it's probably not going to be. Let's talk about some of the dangers. Could we be creating a issue for lightning strikes? Yes, we could. We could be actually, so when lightning strikes, it's called, I think it's called earth potential rise can happen. So lightning strikes and it spreads out and earth potential rise happens. So let's imagine that I've got an HVAC unit outside and I decided to drive a ground rod. And lightning strikes over here in my yard and branches out, and that earth potential rise is what I believe the technical name for it is. We have a lightning strike coming over, and it is on it like at the ground rod itself. There's a very high voltage. Well, over here, and all of that is connected through my house back over to the grounding electrode system. And over here, the potential is zero. Like I have a zero reference over here. And let's say I have 100,000 volts right here, and I've connected those two together, the current will flow through there or can flow through there. So just keep an eye on that you actually can be creating problems. Now there's some equipment that requires it. Most equipment doesn't. You could potentially be creating a path of problem, but you also could be preventing a problem. So let's say we had not a fault, but let's say we had a surge here at this unit. That surge actually could quickly maybe dissipate to the earth and help in that same scenario. But I'll let you make that call. A couple things we have to remember. This can't be used as the equipment grounding conductor. If I drive a ground rod at that HVAC machine and I disconnect the ground, will current flow if in the event of a fault? Yes, it'll flow some because that earth is connected back to the source and it'll try to travel through the earth. Will it be enough to trip the breaker and facilitate the fault? No, it won't. Right? So that's why we just have to make sure that we're not using that. It likely won't trip the breaker. The current won't rise enough to do it. So with that being said, we can't count on it as the equipment grounding conductor. It's not a part of the ground fault path. You're not adding extra robust grounding. All you're doing is making a stable point, but you also could be creating a difference in potential point if lightning were to strike or something else were to happen. So very interesting topic. You can drive a ground rod basically anywhere you want. And this is important for electricians and inspectors to note. If it's in the code, you got to pass it, right? You may not like it. You might want to talk somebody out of it. You might explain all the dangers. But at the end of the day, code is code. Now let's take a look at the funny pick of the day. This one's pretty funny. Let's see if I can get it. I think you guys can see it pretty well. So this is we've got a enclosure here on the wall, panel enclosure here on the wall. We got a breaker, probably has been tripping, and they are just propping it up. Now, I do want to note this, that you see this and you freak out, but a lot of breakers have an internal trip mechanism. So someone can do this on a lot of breakers, and it's already tripped on the inside, even though the handle is still up. So just keep that in mind. This one, it may still be functioning and they may still be forcing it on. So just keep that in mind. But a lot of breakers, they trip internally. The handle doesn't need to be down for it to be in the trip position. That's why sometimes when you go to a house and you got a circuit not working and you're doing troubleshooting, you take the breakers and you go like this real lightly, because sometimes they're still in the forward position, but they're actually tripped. But the handle tie itself never actually, or the handle itself actually never tripped over, and you're doing your troubleshooting and you sit there and you bounce back and forth and you find a floppy one. You're like, wait a second, that thing has tripped. The funniest clean caption down in the comments, if you guys want to get involved in this, will win a pipe fill keychain. We'll ship it to your house absolutely for free. Now let's get to know the coach. Do I like cold or hot weather? Well, I'm going to give you one big guess. We have like an Arctic blast coming down. It's even going to reach us down here in Florida. And I'll give you one big guess what I like. I like hot weather. I can't stand the cold weather. I like it for about 30 minutes. I love sledding, and then I'm ready to fly back to Florida. With that being said, I do want to take the kids. I grew up in Michigan, and we had 2 feet of snow, and I remember one time, I believe Dad had to put me out the front window to dig the front door out. We've had so much. So I've seen snow drifts 30 foot high, and the really cool thing growing up was in parking lots. So it would snow there, and the snow would be there till spring some years. And it would snow again and snow again. And in the parking lots of like your local grocery store, they would, around the light poles, they would make these giant piles of snow because it would just keep snowing and keep snowing. And these piles would get like 15, 20 feet tall. And of course, as kids, you would dig tunnels and play in them and all kind of stuff. So I want to take the kids up sometime to enjoy that. But I am a fair weather person. I like it hot. I really like it blistering hot. I'm a 90 kind of guy. So I like it just where it's blistering hot. That's just kind of weather. I've always been that way, though. It's funny. Now let's head over to Tool Corner. This is probably one of my favorite all-time electrical inventions of all time, and it's called the Homer Helper. I want you to look at this thing. It is an absolute beast. I even have a dedicated video on this, but now that we are partnered up with Racketeers, I want to show you this because you'll find out soon that they are the sponsor of today's podcast as well, and you can save 10% at their website by using the coupon code COACH10 and following the link in the description below. It's very important that you follow that link. So you follow that link in the description below, you use the coupon code COACH10, and this thing here, I want you to look at this. This thing is an absolute beast. So here's how it works. Let's look at it. Hopefully you guys can see that picture real well. Oh, yeah, you can. All right, boom. You rack them like this. I want you to look at this. It's beautiful. Look at that. Now, I don't know if every inspector would take that. I believe they would. Some may not take that, but that is a beautiful install. I don't think I can zoom here. I would zoom in for you. But if you look up here on this beam, they've got them turned sideways. Electrician's carrying them around on his pouch there. Love that. See if we got some other photos. I think we got a video here too here in a second. So let's take a look at this. Boom. Look at that. That's gorgeous. Talk about cable management. Keeps them perfectly spaced. I'm not worrying about bundling adjustments. I've got my big wire down here in the rack. I wonder if it says, oh yeah. Let's look at what wires that it actually can contain. Let me look at it here. We can do quantity per hole. So I can do 3 14-2 with ground all the way up to 10 3 with ground. 3, I can do any two of 8-2, 8-3, 6-2 per hole, plus 1. I can do 6-3 with ground, 2 of them. Wow. I can do 6-3 with ground and a 10 gauge per hole, so 1 through that. Through 110, okay. Quantity per hole, wire combinations, quantity per hole, 12 or as many as it'll fit for voice, data, cable, and other things. Man, this thing's a beast. Let's check out a video. Look at this. That's sleek right there. I like that. Once you head over there, they're only $7.99 a piece. Psh, man, that is cable management at its finest. Let's watch this video. Look at this. The Homer Helper. Oh, my goodness. This is probably the coolest. Look at this. This is beast mode right here. You go in, you set all your boxes, and then you set all your Homer Helpers. Forget about staples. We're done stapling. This thing's a beast. Head over there, pick you up 50 or 100 of them. Check them out. Let me know what you think. Use the coupon code COACH10 to save 10%. I'm loving it. All right, now let's head to the code of the day, and this is probably one of the most important articles in the NEC, and I want you to memorize it. Listen, we're going to be in Article 100. Article 100 is all about definitions. Now, in the 2023 NEC and later, all of the definitions are moved to Article 100, which is awesome because at least they're all in one place. In 2020 and previous, you'd have some definitions, which were code-wide in Article 100, and then you would have definitions in each .2 section of that respective article, and that definition only applied in that article. Well, in 2023, they moved them all the way to Article 100, which is good, but I think there's about 800 definitions there now, so it's about that thick. It's a pretty thick part of the code book. But this is the most important piece because I think what causes the greatest arguments and failed inspections and misunderstandings, misinterpretations of the code, however you want to look at it, is definitions. You think we're talking about one thing, I know we're talking about another, right? If I'm the inspector, or vice versa. And it can be, there's nobody's fault here, but at the end of the day, we got to be on the same page. And if you go to Article 100 and it says that it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, then it's probably a duck. And then all those duck codes kick in, right? If it looks like a kitchen, smells like a kitchen, has all the components of the definition of a kitchen, it's probably a kitchen. And if so, all the kitchen codes kick in, which can be a game changer, especially if it's not caught on the rough end. So it's important for us to understand and know the definitions. And I want you to know where they're at in the NEC. You can head over to nfpalink.org. I think it's .com or .org. I think it's .com, nfpalink.com. And that is the online version of the code book. Highly recommended. I'm not affiliated or anything like that. But I will say this, that NFPA link has been a huge blessing to me. It's got all your different code books right there on the spot. You can go over there and check out it and Article 100. And I want you to remember it today. Where are all the definitions? They're in Article 100. 2023 and later. If you're in 2020 and previous, there are Article 100 definitions, which apply code-wide. And then in the .2 section, so 250.2, 300.2, if there are any definitions that apply only to that article, they, my friends, are in the .2 section of that specific article. Now let's take a look at the history of the day. I've got one planned for us here. There it is. And this one's a little bit different. I'm pretty excited about it. Let's take a look at it. The electrical nature of the human brain. Electricity isn't just what powers our homes or lights or our cities. It's also what powers you. Every thought, every emotion. Give me just a second. I got to get where I can scroll. Boom. All right, there we go. Every thought, every emotion, every memory you have depends on the flow of tiny electrical currents inside of your brain. This story begins with a spark, quite literally, in the 18th century. In 1780, Italian scientist Luigi Galvani made a shocking discovery. While dissecting a frog, he touched a metal scalp to the animal's exposed nerve. Its leg twitched. Galvani believed that he had found animal electricity, a vital force within living beings. His rival, Alessandro Volta, disagreed, claiming the spark came from the contact of two different metals, not from the frog itself. The debate between these two led to the invention of the electric battery by Volta, the voltaic pile, and opened the door for understanding bioelectricity. Now let's fast forward a century, and scientists began mapping out how electricity actually functions in the nervous system. They learned that the brain's 86 billion neurons communicate through electrical impulses called action potentials. Each neuron maintains an electrical charge difference between the inside and outside of its membrane. A dedicated balance of ions like sodium and potassium. In a dedicated balance of ions of sodium and between inside and outside of its membrane, which are a dedicated balance of ions like sodium and potassium. When a neuron fires, it sends a tiny jolt of electricity down its axon, triggering neighboring cells to do the same. This is the language of the brain, electrical signals traveling in precise rhythmic patterns. By the early 20th centuries, researchers like Edgar Adrian and Charles Sherrington were recording these signals directly, confirming that the brain truly runs on electricity. Later in the 1920s, German psychiatrist Hans Berger invented the I've never seen this word. So electroencephalogram? That's what we're going to say it is. Or EEG. That sounds better. A device that measures the brain's electrical activity through electrodes placed on the scalp. For the first time, humans could see brain waves, the rippling pattern of voltages that corresponded to wakefulness, sleep, thought, and emotion. Brain waves come in frequencies: fast gamma waves for intense focus, alpha waves for calm alertness, and theta waves for dreaming, and slow delta waves during sleep. These rhythms form a soundtrack of the mind, and disruptions in them can reveal conditions like epilepsy, insomnia, and depression. Today, the study of the brain's electricity has expanded into incredible new frontiers. New neuroprosthetics allow paralyzed individuals to control robotic limbs with their thoughts. Deep brain stimulation uses implanted electrodes to treat Parkinson's disease and severe depression. Brain-computer interfaces like those developed by Neuralink and other research groups aim to link our neural circuits directly to digital devices. What began as twitching legs in a frog has evolved into an understanding of what the brain is. In essence, an electrical organ, a living circuit capable of thought, creativity, and consciousness. Every spark of imagination, every heartbeat, every emotion is powered by billions of tiny electrical impulses, firing in perfect coordination. The story of the brain's electricity isn't just a story about science. It's a story about what it means to be a human. Because when you think about it, the mind itself is a miracle of light and charge, and a storm of electricity that gives rise to the very experience of being alive. We live in an amazing world, and almost everything is waves, electricity, and impulses. It's so amazing that on this one wave, if you go down here, it's gamma rays and microwaves. And if you go up here, it's radio waves. And if you go in the middle of this wave, it's visible color and light. And X-rays is on this scale. It's all one wave done at different frequencies. And our body is the same way. It sends these waves at different frequencies, these impulses of this electricity back and forth to communicate, to think, to have thought, to do a 30-minute podcast right from, off the top of your brain with some prompts to be able to do it in a way that another being can hear it, translate it, and understand it. Hopefully, that's my goal. So it's just an amazing world that we live in and how it's all connected to electricity. That's why it's so cool to be an electrician. If you're not in the industry and you're just an enthusiast, we're so thankful that you're here. If you're an electrician, tried and true, or inspector, engineer, anybody in between, we are in the coolest industry there ever was. Now let's give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video. Of course, it is Racketeers.com. If you've never been over here, they have a plethora of electrical amazingness. They have electrical books, apprentice kits, cleanup. They have hole cutting accessories, which are one of my favorite, by the way. This one right here is not only do you put it around your saw, but you can also hook your vacuum to it. This one is an absolute beast. So you're doing holes, you're knocking out, you're cutting in can lights. This one here is a beast. If you'll use the coupon code COACH10 and use the link in the description of this video, you can go to Racketeers.com and save 10%. Tons of you have already did it. I'm so thankful because it also helps the channel. And I want to give a shout out and a great thank you to Racketeers for sponsoring this podcast. Now let's round out today with the Small Business Coaching Corner. You either own your own business, you want to own your own business, or you might be forced to own your own business one day. So let's talk about how do I get started, and we're going to talk about your business structure a little bit here today. If you personally go down to your local county permit or city permit office, you might have to go to both, or wherever they issue licenses for just a general business license. If you walk in and do that, you are a sole proprietor. You walk in with your social security number and you start a business. That's called a sole proprietor. Has a lot of benefits because you can start it in about 30 minutes at the courthouse or wherever they take care of that in your area, but it carries the most personal liability, meaning that if something happens at the company that wasn't gross negligence, you cannot shift gross negligence. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about the other types of businesses. You cannot shift gross negligence. But you can shift personal, non-intentional negligence away from your personal assets to the business's assets by forming one of several different types of structure. Type of structure that you choose. It depends on how you're going to be paid, pay yourself, the ability to be able to sell it, whether or not you're a W-2 employee of the company. I am not a tax professional, but I am going to tell you what I do, and then you need to go consult with your tax professional. Any one of the following three that we're going to talk about is going to be a limited liability corporation in the sense that if something happens that's not gross negligence, they don't sue your personal, they can't come after your personal assets. Now, if it's gross negligence, that changes everything. You can go to prison. They likely can come after your personal assets. You cannot, so there's nothing to protect yourself from from bad actors, period. You can't buy a certain type of business structure and then go out and do terrible things and it not come back on you personally and professionally. But an LLC is going to give you that. A lot of people like to go LLC. You can do a partnership with LLC, and I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of LLC. I don't use them, although they're great for things like if I wanted to buy one house and put that one house in an LLC to protect some of my other assets, and I wanted to use that one house as an Airbnb, an LLC would be perfect for that because it's very inexpensive. if I didn't need that income to be a part of a W-2 structure or to get loans with, an LLC is actually a pretty good setup. I can buy one rental house or three or four to protect those assets and have that be an entity of its own. Because if I've got three or four others, I'm going to probably start another LLC. So all 8 of my properties or whatever aren't in the same basket. Does that make sense? So I come over here, I start an LLC, gives me that liability shift, protects those houses. That company owns those houses, but it doesn't own these others, so they can't come after my other houses in my other LLC. And over here, I've got this. So LLCs are great for a lot of things. A lot of people run their business LLC. I don't know all of the ins and outs of paying yourself, but I'm pretty certain you can't be a true W-2 employee of your company in the same way that like a C Corp will offer you, and we'll talk about here in a minute. An S Corp is like a personal corporation. You can have one of those. You pay yourself through the corporation. I don't know all the ins and outs. I don't do S Corps. I do C Corps. A C Corp is a regular corporation like Walmart. And of course, there's different classes and different things. But the reason I like a C Corp, and you may be able to do it with some of these other structures, but I know that you can do it with C Corp, is a C Corp issues shares. So when I sit down at busy.com, they ask me how many shares does the company have? Say 1,000, say 2, it doesn't matter. And then if you want to be the sole owner of all the shares, you put all, let's say I usually do 1,000 shares, and I issue 1,000 shares of stock of this company on, digitally here during the setup on busy.com, and I issue them all to me. If I ever want to sell that company, which I have sold my C Corps in the past, I go to the kitchen table, I write up a contract, and I transfer all 1,000 shares in ownership to these people, and I can walk away that day. I'm done. That's one of the reasons that I do C Corps. And some of these other structures may offer it. You'll have to ask your tax professional. The other reason I like a C Corp is because I am a true W-2 employee of my company. I'm a W-2 employee. The bank, because what's interesting about being self-employed, if you've ever been it, the bank looks at you like a hobo. And I don't mean that any disrespect, but they look at you like you're broke and like you don't have anything, even if you've got money in the bank and you've got steady, provable cash flow. Trying to get loans like house loans and stuff from them is very difficult. So what you do is you set yourself up a C Corp. I'm a W-2 of my employee, because what's interesting about being self-employed is your employees can make $18 an hour and go buy a house. You're making $40 to $50 an hour and have some money in the bank, and they look at you like you don't have a job. So you're telling me my employee who makes $18 an hour, who gets just a special piece of paper saying that I'm paying him, has more validity than the owner of the company who's paying that person. And that's how it is at banks. Good luck getting a loan if you're a sole proprietor, unless you've just got a ton of cash and you've been doing it for a very, very long time. It's very difficult to do. But a W-2 employee, boom, all of a sudden I have this piece of paper that says I'm being paid, and it's being done through the proper channels, through my payroll company. I'm actually being paid the money. Of course, they look into all that. But it's funny how that little piece of paper, especially when going to buy a car, go buy a car as a sole proprietor with no other W-2. Then you can take your own company's W-2 down there as a C Corp and a W-2 employee, and you can take it down there, and as long as you've got 2 or 3 months worth of things, you can go get a car. So if you're getting rid of your W-2 job to go start a business for yourself, and you want that ability to still get loans and be able to do things, you're going to probably want to be a W-2 employee of your company. That's why I do C Corps. And I'll tell you this, they are going to try to sell you 1,000 things on the way to the cart that you don't need. You don't need your federal EIN number. We're going to learn about it tomorrow, and that it's free. There are a million services out there. Everything that you can do for free for yourself in business, they have a service for it. Here on the way to the cart on busy.com, and I'm not knocking them, but I'm telling you, you do not need Busy to do any of this stuff for you. You can do it all of yourself for free. So I don't need them to do my EIN. I think they charge, I don't know how much they charge. Let's say it's $100. You can go do it for yourself in 5 minutes for free on the federal website. Just make sure you're on the actual IRS Gov. And we're going to learn about that part tomorrow because it's an important part of your business. But you go here. This gives you what you get for $0. That's your starting. Look at my card over here on the right. It says 70. Now, there's going to be some things that I am going to need to get on the way out, right? Some of the IRS forms. Some of them you can fill out yourself if you're confused. We can go ahead and get started here. And then on the way to the cart, what I'm wanting to pay attention is that over here, this total stays the same. I think at the end of it, it ends up being around $110. But make sure that in this list of things that you're buying, that some stuff is not snuck in there. You don't need an email through them. Let me get back over here where I can see it. Oh, I can see it perfectly. Oh, let me make sure. $300, and this is going to be how you start it. By the end of this, you're going to have your corporation set up, and that's it. And then you got to go get your federal EIN. We're going to learn about it tomorrow. Then you need your insurance, your licenses, and all that other stuff, and your local business license. But this is step one on how to get started. There's several different options. The worst option for electrician anyways is a sole proprietor. But if you're just starting a small candle making business where you're going and selling candles, a sole proprietor is probably fine. You're not likely to be sued. Nobody's coming after your personal assets, blah, 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 right? But I mean, in electrical, there is sole proprietor is not even in the cards, like zero. I cannot have them coming after my personal truck, my personal income, my assets, anything like that. So, and they will. So with that being said, I just wanted to share this with you. This is how you get started. I hope you guys are enjoying the Small Business Coaching Corner. A lot of what I do is small business coaching, and I want this to be a little free daily dose of that. I am the Electrical Code Coach, and my bargain is that these videos will add value to you, and you will in turn add value to others. This is the Alpha Phase Podcast, but there is one who is the alpha of alphas, and he's the one that gives me the grit, the strength, the determination, the grind, and the ability to do everything that he's called me to do, and anything that I want to get into, and he'll do the same for you. His name is Jesus. I hope that you guys have a great Monday. I want you to know that I pray for you guys every single day. I want to see you win, and a big part of you winning is having this holistic life of goodness and joy and work and grind and grit, and I want you to just have the best one possible. I am the Electrical Code Coach.